What if events had unfolded differently in Spider-Man 2002? Welcome back, my fellow watchers of the multiverse, to a brand new episode of What If. And in today's episode, it's gonna take a little different turn. And I do want to say I want to give a huge shout out to Peyton Anderson for requesting what if Peter Parker and Harry Osborn were bitten by the radioactive spider in Spider-Man 2002. But to actually, solidify this as a what if on the channel, and in this reality, both Peter and Harry were bitten by the genetically altered spiders, and they both got the powers of Spider-Man. But that being said, let's dive into this highly anticipated Marvel's What If. Location: Midtown Secondary College of Science and Technology. Time: 12:02 p.m. Peter Parker was very downcast. He and his peers at school were supposed to go over to the University of Columbia for an excursion, but they had just received shocking news. The university had run bankrupt because of some poor financial deals by the administration. This had resulted in the cancellation of the school excursion, which had been booked ever since. Peter had always wanted to go to the University of Columbia, as it was his dream of every aspiring scientist because of their research. Peter had ranted about the whole thing to Harry, but he just laughed. Peter was pissed, as it was not funny to him. When he asked Harry why he was laughing, he just said that everything was just funny because his dad, Norman Osborn, had just bought the research work of the university. Peter could not believe his eyes. Norman Osborn had bought the research work of the university. This was why he was totally dumbfounded when Harry invited him to the Oscorp facility to check out the research work of the University of Columbia. Peter could not believe his luck. Harry just laughed it off and said that it was not a big deal, as Peter had been helping him in a lot of things regarding academics. After that, Mary Jane passed on her way to class, and Harry told Peter to try and approach her, but even the joy of visiting the Oscorp facility was not enough to fill him in with confidence. He told Harry that he would do it another time. Harry mocked him by saying that he was always saying next time. That time would never reach till the end of our stay in school, if care is not taken. Harry told Peter. Peter just laughed it off. He knew that one day, fate would shine on him, just like it had concerning the Oscorp facility. Peter could not wait to go and see the research of the university at the Oscorp facility. Harry knew that it was no big deal taking Peter to the facility, but he just hoped that his father would not find it disturbing. The only thing that was left, really, was for Peter to get permission from Uncle Ben and Aunt May to go to the new Oscorp facility, and he really prayed that would be a yes. Peter's prayers were answered, and he was granted permission by Uncle Ben and Aunt May. It did not take much time from Peter to convince them, as they had an idea of who Harry was. After they had granted their permission, Peter had immediately called Harry to tell him the good news. Harry was happy concerning it, and he quickly informed his father, who also gave him the permission to bring Peter along to the facility. Harry had noticed that his father had been absent-minded recently, and this was one of the scenarios. In fact, Harry guessed that his father had just granted him the permission because he didn't want anyone disturbing him. Harry seriously hoped that everything would be okay, as he didn't want to get in trouble with his father. Norman knew that he was not paying enough attention to his son, but he had enough problems as it was. He heard rumors that the board members of Oscorp were not pleased with him, after he supposedly spent their money on acquiring the research work of the University Columbia. The reason Norman had done that was because their super soldier serum was not coming through, and he needed an alternative. Norman figured that he could experiment with the genetic spiders, and it could actually get him the military contract. If Norman did not get the military contract, then it would go to Quest Aerospace, and he knew that if that happened, his board members would not waste any time in betraying him. So right now, Norman Osborn was putting his eggs in 2 baskets, and he hoped that at least one of them would work for him. What are the odds that both of them would fail? Norman asked himself. But he knew that it was very likely that they both could. The designated time reached, and Peter was on cloud 9. It was 9:15 p.m. at the Oscorp facility. When Harry's dad met Peter and they got talking, he started feeling very jealous. Norman was so impressed with Peter that Harry was feeling left out. Norman went out of his way to give them the tour of the facility after finding out about Peter's dreams and grades. He wasted no time in comparing them with Harry's grades. Norman asked Harry several times why he could not be more like Peter, and it infuriated him. Peter was just awestruck by Norman and the Oscorp facility. In fact, he was also very invigorous of what Harry had. He was willing to do anything to catch a break from his dad, and the opportunity came quickly. Norman got called into an emergency meeting, and Harry was left to take Peter to the research work of the University of Columbia. Harry was treated like royalty in the facility, and they quickly found their way to the section of the university. Harry did not think it was any way special, but Peter felt like he was in heaven. He went about checking out every research work. There was nothing that could spoil this day, Peter said in his mind. Little did he know that today was the day that he and Harry's world would expand beyond their wildest imaginations. Norman was called into an emergency meeting as the general of the military had arrived on a surprise meeting to check out the project that he had been working on. Norman was fidgeting, but as an experienced businessman and pitch salesman, he composed himself. Norman knew that he had to be confident in the delivery of his pitch, and that's what he did. Even though the general's facial expression was discouraging, when Norman was done, the general expressed his displeasure. He stated that the military will not be spending more money on Oscorp, as they were not fruitful. The super soldier serum was not ready, and Norman knew it. But if given more time and more funding, he was certain that they could achieve it. But the general was having none of it. As all hope seemed lost, Norman decided that it was time to employ the alternative. He told the general that he had been working on genetic spiders, which could also make a super soldier. The general laughed mockingly for a long time as the ridiculous concept. He had heard about the Oscorp facility purchase of the childlike research of the University of Columbia, but he did not know that it was for this purpose. "I want super soldiers, not Spider-Men," the general said, as he laughed at his own joke. After that, it was not long after that he departed, leaving a very agitated Norman. Norman knew that he had to do everything to get the military contract, as the Oscorp facility needs the funds. When Norman thought about the genetic spiders, his anger greatly increased, as it was a futile investment. He then ordered that they should be destroyed. Peter and Harry were still exploring the section of the University of Columbia when they started clearing it out. They started with the spiders, and Peter quickly asked what was happening. The worker just looked at him with scorn, but when Harry asked, he was answered immediately with the utmost courtesy. This reminded Peter painfully about his background. The worker told Harry that Norman, his father, had ordered that they should be cleared out. When asked further, the employee told them that he did not know the reason for the action, as he was just carrying out orders. In that moment, because of the distraction of the questions, the glass box that the worker was using to pack the spiders quickly slipped, and many events occurred within a split second. Harry dived out of the way as some spiders spilled out, while Peter rushed forward to help the worker. Subsequently, a scream followed as he was bitten by a spider, as he helped to steady the glass container. Within a few moments, all of the spiders were vacuumed back, as the employee was quick to capture them. All the spiders but one was captured. Harry was laughing at Peter because he was bitten by one of the spiders. He stated that the venom could have some dangerous side effects, but Peter downplayed it, even though he was trembling inside. Peter was beating himself up for rushing to help the worker, who was even rude to him, but he guessed that it was just his nature to help people in need. The worker thanked him profusely, and Peter guessed that it was well worth it. As they were about to leave the section of the research of Columbia, Harry winced in pain as he slapped the back of his neck. Apparently, one of the spiders had escaped into his clothes. "What's wrong?" Peter asked, but he just stated that everything was fine. Harry, however, felt a chill go through his spine as he saw the dead spider that bit him on his hand. Peter was suspicious, and he immediately peeked, and when he did, he could not control his laughter. "I guess if anything happens then, it would have happened to both of us," Peter said. A lot of things happened to them. Peter and Harry were currently on top of a building that they were not normally to be on. They were just sitting at the roof, staring into space in utter disbelief. A lot of things had truly happened to them after the bite, and they both reminisced about how they had first discovered their powers. Harry was formerly a sleepwalker in his childhood days, but those events were far from over. So it came as a surprise to Harry when he woke up, sticking to his room ceiling. Harry had screamed in pure terror and surprise, and then he fell down to his bed. When his father and Bernard came to check up on him, he was even more terrified because he heard when they were coming, which was unbelievable. Harry did not know that was just the beginning, as he discovered that he was faster. When he got to school to meet Peter, he knew for sure that it was the effect of the spider's venom. According to Peter, his body had changed overnight, and it was very evident. Peter now had perfect vision and a well-defined muscle tone. Harry discovered that his muscles were also more defined. Like Harry, Peter also gained greatly increased agility and speed. What Peter had that Harry had not yet discovered for him was the ability to fire strands of strong webbing from his wrists. Peter told Harry how he discovered the ability, and he could not stop cracking up, as it had caused quite a scene in the cafeteria. Because of the discovery of his powers, Harry had missed almost half of his classes, and also the cafeteria. During the cafeteria session, Peter had discovered that he could fire webs from his hand. Parker mistakenly fired webs that caused a tray of food to splash on Flash Thompson. It had almost gotten him a beating, but using his powers, Peter beat up Flash. While Harry was also on his way to school, he discovered that he had something that Peter called the spider sense. The unlikely sixth sense gave them a warning of danger. After school was over, they talked about their surprise, and Harry stated that it was a shame that they did not have super strength, and immediately a look passed between the two of them, and they decided to check if their luck was enough. To their surprise, they could both lift up a car, and it showed that they had super strength. They were very elated about the whole development. After that, Harry told Peter about his experience of being on the ceiling of his house. Peter attributed it to their ability to extend a mass of minute barbs from their skin, which allowed them to adhere to surfaces. After that, they decided to try it out, and that was how they found themselves at the top of the roof, reminiscing about the events of the day. A lot of things were going through their mind, but at that point, one thing was for sure, and that was that their lives would never be the same again. Norman Osborn was working himself to the core, as he was never a man who gave up easily. It was the sheer determination and persistence that got him to the point of being the CEO of Oscorp. Norman was currently with his assistant, who was very doubtful about the next steps that they were about to take. The assistant then asked Norman again whether it was wise to continue with the experiment, as it was very dangerous. The expression that Norman gave him made the assistant wish that he had not asked the question. Norman's look was that of a very desperate man who had nothing left to lose and everything to win. Norman attributed his very next risky step as a necessary one, as he had to save his company and also further the research. The assistant reminded him that the serum was not yet stable, but Norman threw away his pleas by stating that all the big scientific discoveries were gotten through the great risk. Norman's next risky step was to test the serum on himself. He figured that if it worked, he would surely get the military contract and save his company. Better still, he would be a super soldier. Norman then ordered his assistant to test the serum on him. The assistant gulped, but followed the order of Norman as he knew that it was no use in arguing with him. Once Norman had made up his mind, he could not change it. With no other choice, the assistant knew that if he did not obey the wish of Norman, then it meant that he would be fired. He decided that he would just have to do what Norman was asking him to do, even though Norman could potentially die. The assistant immediately fired up the machine without any second thoughts, as he knew that if he deliberated on the issue, he would get cold feet. Osborn immediately gasped in pain as the green liquid was engulfed into the machine he was in. Soon, they were injected into him through the use of tubes, and he was in absolute pain that he had never felt before. Norman's screams and shouts made the assistant very scared, to the point that he ran to cut off the power supply to the machine. The assistant decided that he would still get fired, and even jailed if Norman died. As he got to the machine where Norman was embedded in, to turn it off, it immediately exploded and blasted him away. Norman came out of the smoke and debris of the machine, and when he saw the struggling body of his assistant, he held him by the neck and choked him until he died. After that, Norman started cackling manically. Norman went into the machine, but the Green Goblin had emerged out of it, and he was going to wreak havoc on the city. But first, he decided to pay Quest Aerospace a visit. Peter and Harry went home, with a lot of ideas in their mind about how to use their powers, and to test them. Peter discovered that he could jump great distances, and he used that to get home. When he was home, he decided that his new powers were a bonus, as he could use them to get Mary Jane. Parker knew that he lacked confidence and money, but he quickly deduced that he could get money easily now with his new powers. A dark thought came into his head, that he should rob a bank, but he quickly pushed it out. Peter suddenly saw an advertisement of a wrestling match, and he decided that he would join in the match to get paid. But first, Peter decided that he had to find a way to get Uncle Ben off his back, as he got called by the school that he beat up Flash Thompson at the cafeteria. Uncle Ben had quickly caught on to the strange behaviors of Peter, and assumed he was keeping secrets, which was true. But Peter decided that he could not reveal his powers to Uncle Ben, or Aunt May, at least for now. Peter then suddenly got an idea of how to get Uncle Ben off his back for the night. He decided that he would get Harry to call Uncle Ben to tell him that he should allow Peter to come over to his house to work on a project. Within a few minutes, Harry agreed, and Peter was given the permission to go. Harry was jealous that Peter was going out. When he asked Peter what he was going to do during the time, he asked to call Uncle Ben and lied. Peter said that he was going to try out his powers. Harry decided also that he had to test out his powers too, and simultaneously. The advert of the same underground wrestling match was displayed on the screen of Harry's television. Harry quickly decided that he would attend it as a masked competitor to test out his powers too. He decided that he would not let Peter get ahead of him, as he felt slightly jealous that he discovered the web powers before him. Harry waited for hours for his father to come back from work to ask for permission. He started feeling worried when he did not come back, but he quickly brushed it off as one of his late outings. Harry then grabbed a ski mask and a black jumpsuit as he escaped via his window, as he could not wait anymore for his dad. Harry could not believe his eyes. He had just witnessed a small person dressed in a funny-looking Spider-Man suit defeat someone called the Bonesaw, who was a monster of a man. Harry then quickly decided that he had found the perfect opponent to test out his powers on. Harry quickly somersaulted from the crowd into the ring, and it got a lot of cheers from the crowd. The management was not too happy with this development, but after the maddening chants of the crowd, they decided to give in and make it official. They first gave Harry a contract to sign, and he called himself the Webber. After that, the match started with the roars of the crowd at its peak. After what seemed like an eternity, the match was still going on, and the cheers of the crowd was rapidly turning into boos, as the fighters were equally matched. It was as if they had equal speed, strength, and reflexes. The crowd wanted a winner, but the fighters were evenly matched. Harry quickly launched another attack on Peter, who quickly dodged it due to the spider sense. Peter quickly turned around to deliver a roundhouse kick, but Harry rapidly sprung out of the way, but without damaging, as the foot of Peter connected slightly with his stomach. Harry screamed from the pain, and Peter immediately shouted his name, as he could recognize that scream and voice anywhere. After that, they immediately knew that they were facing themselves all this time, and everything made sense, as they were evenly matched. It was as if the universe had stopped, and it was at this moment they quickly walked out of the ring to the boos and the cheers of the crowd. Peter just knew that there was no way that he could get a paycheck now to impress Mary Jane for beating up Harry. The thought did not really bother him again, as it was ridiculous that he had been combating Harry all this while. 10-story building. Time, 9 p.m. After a few moments, Peter and Harry were on the top of a rooftop not far away from the underground wrestling building. They felt quite sore, both physically and emotionally, because they had combated themselves. They then made a promise on the rooftop, an oath that they would never fight themselves no matter what. Not long after that, they heard a disturbance and discovered a robber running out of the underground wrestling building. Harry and Peter looked at themselves, and they both had the same idea. They quickly put their masks on and jumped down. Within seconds, the robber was webbed up and left dangling on one of the streetlights. Peter and Harry quickly escaped from the scene as the police officers arrived. They jumped from building to building as they screamed in ecstatic and joy. They had finally figured out how to put their powers to use. They would fight criminals. Harry asked Peter what their superhero names would be. "Definitely not the Webber," Peter said with a snort, as he mocked Harry for his choice of the name. In the end, they settled for Spider-Man, as it paid homage to the origin of their powers. That night, Harry Osborn and Peter Parker saved more civilian lives and property, as they also thwarted the plans of the criminals before they retired to Harry's home. Location: the Osborn mansion. Time, 11:45 p.m. That night, Peter followed Harry to his house, as he told Uncle Ben that he would be spending the night there. Even though the night had gone well, they felt this sense of dissatisfaction, as the criminals they caught were too easy to beat. They wanted a real villain to combat, and test out the real extent of their powers. Peter deduced, if he was alone, maybe capturing the criminals would be a very difficult, but because he and Harry were teaming up, it was quite a breeze. Suddenly, as if it was an answer to their prayers, a reporter popped on the screen with breaking news. The Quest Aerospace facility, its personnel, and a prominent military general had been killed by a creature that people were now calling the Green Goblin. A picture popped up, and it was the sighting of the creature. It truly looked like a Green Goblin. The emotion that was going through the minds of the other news watchers was fear at the sight of the picture, but excitement was all that Harry and Peter felt. They had gotten their first major villain, and that was the Green Goblin. And that is going to be it for part 1 of What If Harry Osborn and Peter Parker Were Bitten by the Radioactive Spider in Spider-Man 2002. What if Peter Parker and Harry Osborn got bit by the spider? Like, what do you think would have happened? We're getting into a very interesting storyline where things are going very intense, very fast, and I do want to say the pacing is very different within the storyline because I didn't want to go back over to, them getting bit and then watching, Flash Thompson getting beat up. Like, it didn't make sense to add all that stuff, and I thought it would be very interesting to kind of, pass all that and go a little step further with the storyline and really showcase the character development for Peter Parker and Harry Osborn, and to really showcase their friendship within this episode. I think you're going to be very sad what's going to happen next, and I don't want to say what's going to happen, but it's going to be interesting. We already know that Norman Osborn at some point within this storyline is going to be getting the Venom symbiote, so it's only a matter of time. But how will that happen? The clock is ticking, and time really does matter for this storyline. Like, I cannot thank you guys so much. Like, I do want to say, this did take a very long time to make this storyline. It took me months to finally get down. I didn't want to rush it and make it into garbage. It had to be something very different from all my other storylines, as well as, making it original. I just really hope that you enjoyed this storyline. And that being said, if you enjoy the latest what ifs on this channel, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends are all up to date with the latest content. Do make sure to follow me on Instagram to get all the latest updates, as well as my Twitter and Facebook, because you can see all the latest content, when videos are being posted, and when you should look out for them. I also do want to say I do have a Patreon account, so if you do want to see these videos early, you can get that benefit if you become a member on the YouTube community, or if you just become a member on Patreon, you will see these videos exclusively, as well as a ton of behind-the-scenes content. But I can't thank you enough, and I'll see you in the next video. That being said, have an amazing day. Peace out.